Creators often find themselves at a crossroads where they feel a strong desire to pivot their channel into a new direction. It can feel really daunting and quite honestly crippling, but don't worry. Today, we're going to dive into the details of an effective pivot and take the mystery out of it for you. That's next.
Hey, welcome to the Video Creators Podcast presented by vidIQ. You know how you put a lot of time and energy into your YouTube channel for not nearly enough growth? Yep, we get it. We are here today to help you change that.
Hello, creators. How are you guys? It's great to see you here again for another Video Creators Podcast episode brought to you by vidIQ like we do every single Monday. We're just hanging out, sharing more advanced growth tips and tactics, next level strategy, growing your business, helping you reach more people and change their lives. I'm hanging out with Sam and Blake today, two of the YouTube strategists on the team. Hey guys, I'm curious. Have you guys seen anything good recently on YouTube? I know you've seen something good recently on YouTube, but I would love to know what things you're watching.
Yeah, actually, it's funny you ask because there's a channel called Sticks, and they recently, you guys know how much I love Ryan Trahan, and so these guys...
Never said that before.
You've never heard of him? So I only talk about him every single podcast. But these guys, they are really, really good filmmakers. And they basically created a Netflix movie trailer for Ryan Trahan. And they casted a doppelganger, this guy who looks just like him. And it's I know
that channel.
Yeah, it's a couple minutes long. And it was absolutely insane. Super, super interesting. Super cool idea. So that's what I've been watching lately.
Yeah, they're real. I remember I've seen them too, and I know their mission through these trailers and making it of content creators because they did Ryan Trahan, but who else have they done so far? Was it Logan Paul?
They did
they did somebody else as well. Eric, that's what it was.
Eric.
Yeah,
and then
the end goal is to make a full featured film for Mr. Beast. That's what their goal is.
I didn't know that. That's super cool.
It's like a calling card to him.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. So I think that's something the most different I think I've even seen on YouTube. Just out of nobody else has done something like this yet. So
it's funny because I just did because one of my jobs at vidIQ is really to train YouTube strategists, and I've been training a lot of strategists lately. And I had developed a shorts training, and in it, I watched an insane amount of shorts, and I wanted to see what was one of the most viewed shorts, and that's a Zach King short. Of course, ironically, it's another channel who kind of took it from TikTok, posted it, and has 1.2 billion views for his short. But he posted it himself earlier in the year and has almost 500 million views himself. And for those of you who don't, Blake said naturally. For those of you who don't know, Zach does a lot of kind of magic or optical illusion type things. But that's not the thing that was so interesting. I first off love his content, and it had been a while since I saw it. So I thought, well, let me go look at his long form content because that's just my viewer habits, right? If I connect with a shorts creator, I naturally want to go see if they've been making longer videos. And he just did a video recently that didn't go as far, but it was totally curious. And it was him and his wife on the thumbnail, and they had some news. And so I'm a sucker for all of those. And I don't want to give too many of the details out, but I'm going to encourage everybody to go watch it. I'll leave the link in the show notes because it was one of the best pieces of community content that I had seen in a long time. And I couldn't stop watching it, the story from beginning to end. I was completely mesmerized. And this is not a creator that I'm in the community consistently week to week. But yeah, that was one of the more interesting pieces for me.
As a side note, I actually have had a friend in a couple of his videos before. There's one that did a Zoom video where they're passing stuff around, and she's in one of the windows. First time I saw the video, I was like, I feel like I know this person. And then I ended up looking at her. It's oh yeah, I was in. I'm like, oh my gosh, so pretty cool. Wow. No, that's really cool. I think of a community that stands up to me just in general too. Mark Rober, when he talked about his son and kind of the story behind that blew me away. I've never seen someone so vulnerable about something like that. But it was just for somebody I'm used to seeing a certain type of content. It was so left field, but it just pulled me right in. So it was really cool seeing those types of videos. And again, the audience always resonates with it for sure.
Totally. Yeah. Now, if we had planned an episode around community content, that probably would have been an excellent segue, but we didn't. Instead, Today,
I mean, we could. It's
We're
not
going to
too
change
late.
everything on the spot right now.
instead, we are actually going to dig into something that can be just completely crippling for a creator. And that is, should I actually pivot? So I would love for you guys to define what pivoting a channel even looks like.
Well, see, I was trying to pivot the conversation to community content, but we pivoted that. That was kind of the transition.
The good old fashioned double pivot, right? No, when I think of pivoting a channel, I think of usually it's actually like we're reaching maybe a slightly different audience, or we're changing like our value proposition, or kind of the niche we're in, or like kind of exactly what our channel is right now. Like we're going to make some sort of a change that's going to look different after making this pivot to what it currently looks like right now.
Yeah, and you used a very big word there, value proposition, technically 2 words. Define that for somebody who's brand new to the channel.
Yeah, I would actually define that with a question. And the question that I like to ask is, why would I subscribe to your YouTube channel? And so whatever that answer is going to be your value proposition. What is the value that you propose a viewer, and why should they stick around? What is that thing that makes them want to subscribe?
What would I get? What am I getting from this? Is kind of what I tell people. What am I getting from this and watching your channel? Because I feel like I've asked that question before too, as a side note of like, why should I subscribe to your channel? Like, okay, well, I make really great gaming content. It's like, cool. Why do I care? What am I getting from it as a viewer? That's kind of but yeah, the whole point of knowing your audience. How do I communicate that? How do I communicate knowing who my audience is, the emotions that they have? How do I communicate to them that, yes, I recognize that, and that's the value of my channel?
I love that. And I feel like, why somebody would want to pivot is a really important question too. I'm sure the 2 of you, I have worked with several channels who have pivoted. I myself have pivoted my own personal YouTube channel several years back, which was terrifying, quite honestly. Especially when you've been successful at one thing and then it's like, I'm going to now craft content in a totally different way. Yeah, that's scary. But like, what are some of the things that you guys have come up against with, or like the roadblocks that your creators have had in just even thinking, not even implementing, but thinking about pivoting?
Yeah, I think there's a fear that they could break the YouTube channel and it'll all come crashing down, and all of their subscribers will unsubscribe, and it'll end. That'll kill the channel. So that's probably the biggest fear, which I always press back quickly and say, there's nothing you could do that would break the channel. It's going to be okay. We can do this. That's usually the first thing that that I hear.
I get people who ask me, should I start a brand new channel completely? In the pivot.
That's a very common question.
And there's a lot of to pull out of that question too, because there sometimes could be a case depending on how big the pivot might be. But that's a concern for a lot of people too. I get from them is like, do I have to because again, the fear comes like, I don't want to start over. Do I have to do this?
Well, what does that look like, Blake?
Yeah, I mean,
Go a little deeper there.
Depends on a few things. I think again, how big of a pivot we're doing. If we're going from, and I think even the size of the channel comes into play too. If we have a big community and I'm building it around automotive, and all of a sudden I'm tired of doing automotive stuff, I want to go right to cooking. That's a really massive 180 switch of like, it's going to be so jarring. If that's the case, that's when I'd say, okay, it might be worth considering a new channel, because that's going to be a hard shift for a lot of people, as opposed to something like what I've seen done, a tech channel that I watch, going from, or even actually one that Sam's worked with recently too, a tech channel that's kind of switched focus a little bit towards sustainable energy for the house. Still under the same niche, same value, but kind of a slight little adjustment on course correction is what I would call it, pretty much.
That's a good way of putting it. I like that, course correction. We once worked with a creator, this is years back. She had a scrapbooking channel. Okay, so scrapbooking, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's taking photos, mementos, and things that you have, and somehow encapsulating it in with paper in an album, that you can look at. I think of it like a picture album, just a little bit more creative, a little more artistic. So she had that channel, and wanted to pivot it to really more like meal prepping. Not even close to remotely the same audience. However, she did it on the same channel. So I'm curious, how do you guys feel like that experiment worked out?
You know, it's interesting because
This is interesting because they don't know this channel. We've never talked about this. So.
Well, it's interesting because there's a channel that's coming to mind for me, and I just cannot think of who it is. It's a very successful channel who did like a really hard pivot like that, like totally changed. And so, like, it's possible. I would say that it's possible, and you can do it, and you can be successful. It may just take more time. So I don't know this channel that you were talking about, but I would imagine that it maybe took a little more time it's almost like starting from scratch. So you can do it. It's just maybe you might have a bit of a harder time and like a bigger churn period.
Yep. Blake, what do you think?
I have a creator that comes to mind that did it well. And I don't want to pull him up because he's a bigger creator, but he's done it. He's went from a running niche to what he is now, which is more entertainment and storytelling. So I have seen it happen. And I think he did around 20,000 subscribers as well, too, when he did the pivot. So I have seen it done. I definitely agree of like and this is what I tell everybody, like there's always exceptions to the cases, and there may not necessarily be a full-on reason for it, but generally it's difficult. But Sam is right too. I mean, that's why people who buy channels with subscribers already in there and try to grow it struggle so much, because they might have bought a channel that was sitting around all around a gaming niche, and now they bought a channel with 50,000 subscribers, and now they're focusing on, fitness, and it's not working. And that's because that's not what the channel's built around. Yeah.
Well, I think too, it's like the thing that would speed it up is probably how well have you been able to cultivate your community? Like, how well do you know your community, but also how well does your community know you? Yeah. And so I think you'd have a much better time pivoting if you had some like strong primal branding and a community that like you had a lot of connection points, and they're probably like, you can do whatever you want. Like I'm subscribed to you as a human because I know you. And so I think the creators who have the hardest time are those that Blake just said, like, they're buying a channel and they're starting, from there. And it's like that sort
different
of
people, different content,
like trust
totally different. Yeah. Maybe even different language. I've seen that.
Oh yeah.
Different languages. And in those cases, it's hard too. And it's always heartbreaking to see a creator like buy a channel, and our audience is probably like, what? You can buy a channel? Yeah, you can. And I've seen creators buy like, a channel that has like 300,000 subscribers or 160,000, and they think they've made it. But the previous channel was in Hindi, or the previous channel, I mean, it was like so far out of left field, a different audience. Maybe it's, all like a male audience because it's about cars. And then you're all of a sudden, doing a, let's clean the house type of a channel around cleaning videos, and that's a very big pivot. In those cases, it's hard news to deliver, but it would just be better just starting off from scratch. Versus trying to navigate that. So she had, I don't want to reveal her name or anything, but she had, I think, around 12,000 subscribers when she decided to pivot her channel, because it just wasn't growing. It's a very small niche, not a lot of really large channels in that niche. And she got her silver play button within a year. Yes, by pivoting the channel and talking about something she was passionate about. I mean, she really enjoyed the other topic too, but she really had a passion around this and just went full force. Now, here's the thing. She probably kept some of her audience, because some of her audience probably did fall into both, but she probably also lost a lot of people because of it.
And I would say too, hearing that subscriber base is like the community is small enough where there's still the ability to do that kind of extremist pivot a little bit there.
Yes.
So
but you know what, when it's me as the creator and I've worked so hard for those 12,000 people, I can't see that.
That's a lot for them too.
It feels like everything, but you got to trust us that you can make a pivot at that size. I would just recommend keeping it on that channel and just going forward from there. Yep. Cool. So I'm curious, some of the fear factor in YouTube pivots, what does that look like for creators?
Yeah, well, I mean, we did talk about the fear of like it'll break the channel, but I think maybe even some more surface level fears are the negative comments and kind of like the unsubscribes and the churn that it does kind of happen. I think the negative comments are inevitable, even if you're going to pivot or not. Like the minority is always the loudest, so there will be negative comments kind of regardless. But definitely the churn, I wouldn't even see that as this negative thing. Ideally, actually, the churn would be quick, because ideally, coming back to value proposition, you have a super clear value proposition that your audience and new audience members as well can see and quickly make a decision of, oh yeah, this is right for me, or no, this isn't right for me. And so I would actually say, the unsubscribes are going to happen. It probably would be better actually to have a more kind of like quick and dirty, a lot of people unsubscribe fast so that the churn is over and you're not in this like long-term limbo of just uncertainty and like, vague. The audience just doesn't know, like it's not clear.
And that can look different for all sorts of channels. If you have a channel that's really well established and has a really big audience, but maybe YouTube hasn't really surfaced your content to them, or they haven't engaged with them in a while. So they may see it from, maybe months till they see it, maybe even a year later. So you may have to deal with some of that negative churn for a while. But I know that neither of you ever had a chance to work with him, but Lennon Bone used to be a strategist here on this channel, and he had a saying that he used to always say, "Get them out of your car." Just let your audience out of your car. It's not a bad thing. It's not anything to be afraid of, because they're not yours to keep if they're not on board. And that's an okay thing. It's an okay thing. So what would be a practical thing to tell somebody of how to actually help create that ripple that you're talking about, Sam or Blake?
You mean in pivoting? You mean by ripple?
Well, like he's saying, how do you maybe intentionally create that churn? Like what does that look like if you're going to create content?
My first thought is engaging with the audience, letting them aware of that, letting them know, whether they be the community tab, whether it be a community video.
Content.
Yeah.
We were going to talk about community content at some point.
We got here at some point. I pivoted it. I finally got here.
Nice.
Nice. I see what you did there. Yeah, maybe just to tack onto that too, I think establishing what the value proposition is and who exactly is the new audience. Is the audience like a slightly different version of the audience that's already here, or is it like pretty different? I think knowing exactly who you're talking to going into it is important. But even with some of the community like posts and things, you might even consider making a new updated channel trailer as well, and like channel branding and things like that as well. Just like really clarifying, this is what this channel is. This is the value that it has for you, and that can help kind of speed things up a little bit more too.
Maybe lean into some primal branding a little bit. And primal branding are, it's kind of like the 7 elements of primal code. So Sam's kind of talking about telling your creation story a little bit about the new pivot, but also he was talking about what you stand for, but what you stand against too. Don't lean into it hard here, because that's how people are going to connect, right? They're going to be like, oh, I'm on board here, or nope, I'm gone. Let me out of the car. Right? Yeah.
I would even say, like, how could you organically weave some of that language just into your content moving forward? If maybe there is like a small, short creed. It doesn't have to be this long-winded, and by the way, I'm pivoting my channel, blah, 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 blah. That's kind of detracting from the value of the video. But again, kind of coming back to value proposition, ideally you could just weave in like a short sentence of, this is why I believe so much in blank. And it kind of reinforces like the new direction of the channel. So it's not detracting, but it just, again, like adds so much more clarity for the audience as you're moving forward.
So am I hearing a pivoting and primal branding? Is that what you're saying? It's slowly seeding in the new stuff?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pivoting your primal branding a little bit. How could you just clarify in your content? And it's not like a whole dedicated community video, but like, how can you just weave in some of that kind of reinforces the new direction?
Right.
Yeah, I would push against that and say that I would do a dedicated video.
Oh, I would totally recommend it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought you were saying to
I'm
do
just
it
saying,
more.
in addition to that, you can.
Okay, in addition, yeah. And I think also taking the perspective too is I know that this is really about you, because a lot of times people feel like they're in a rut, or they're just not passionate about that, or they're going down a different path. So that is all about you, but not to lose sight of the viewer. And so if we're crafting content really with them in mind and aligning us together, this is the direction that this channel is going to take, but what's really in store for you, really more from that perspective, and then leaning into some of that primal branding. So, maybe I'm trying to think of a practical way of saying
I
this.
do have a practical example.
Go for it. Go for it. Yeah.
Blake and I actually both did this consultation together. It was like a clothing, like a shirt entrepreneur who makes shirts.
Canadian,
Nice.
Canadian guy, great guy, and he was wanting to pivot and just go broader, like kind of all things entrepreneurial, like starting your own business sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so it just was like taking what he was already doing and just broadening it a little bit more. And so, we recommended him to, why don't you just start? Because he was really nervous about it. And so we were like,
he just hit 100,000, I think.
Yeah, he was right at around 100K subscribers at that point. And we just recommended, you could just dip your toe in the water, make like a community poll, and just kind of ask your community, hey, this is kind of what I'm thinking, and really lean into the vision of this is what I really want to equip you, the audience, with moving forward. And so he did it, and it was pretty open-ended too. And so his community was all in the comments responding to this post, I would love this, this is so great, or hey, I've been following for a while and I don't have a shirts business, but I have a business doing this. So this would actually equip me so much more. But doing something like that was really helpful to just kind of, and I think this was what you're asking, Ingrid, how does it meet your vision for the pivot and then what the audience is looking for? How do you kind of intertwine those things?
And how do you actually get them on board too, to where, when you're talking about, when you as a creator are just talking about you, it's hard for me to find myself in that story. So how do we meet somewhere in the middle was kind of where I was getting at.
No, that's good. I think even with him, well, first of all, the invitation to include them in the process, I think, is one thing. I feel like I'm a part of that. But if it's a course correction, pivot towards where we're going, okay, cool. The value of the channel has been this, and that's been awesome, and I've definitely enjoyed it myself, and I've loved seeing you guys react to it. But I feel like, this new direction not only opens up some more conversation, some more inspiration, but for you guys, I love the direction of we've explored this probably to the extent. Let's take this direction and see what it means for you at the same time. Kind of turning the pivot, because if they're coming after, if they're part of your community to begin with, and they've already bought into your value proposition and your mission of your channel, odds are the direction you want to go to, they're probably going to be okay with. But if we include them and say, again, it's pivoting that in that moment, the value proposition, but the emotion and the why towards them, and say the direction, while is for you, but at the same time, say the direction is actually for you, my audience, at the same time, to really make sure that I'm continuing to pour into you, benefit you, whatever it may be. Using that type of language, like you said, what was it just a couple seconds ago, some really good leadership language. I would just say use some really good leadership language in terms of putting that on the audience, saying this is for you to empower you, whatever that path may be, right? So, but yeah, that way you're using that language to better kind of ease them into the direction, and they're probably more bought into that. The deep why too as well.
Yeah.
That sparks a new question for me, but I'll let you finish. Go ahead, Sam.
Okay, I was just going to say, it's interesting. It sounds a lot like kind of our story with the acquisition with vidIQ, and Tim's whole vision at first was we're going to try to reach people, change lives, and by pivoting slightly and broadening, it's the same. It's a similar vision to reach people, change lives. We're just able to on such a greater magnitude now after kind of moving into that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious though, is there a perfect time to pivot? How do you know when is the time to pull the trigger on this? Because that's a tough thing for a creator.
If I can quote the Spider-Verse movie. You never know, Miles. It's a leap of faith.
That's what I was going to say. There's never really a right time for it. It's a leap of faith. No, 100%. I don't think there's necessarily a right time, because I think with that mentality, a lot of us get caught up in a lot of things in life of like, this is the right time to do this, right time to do that. It literally is like just taking that first step. Now, there are warning signs you can look out for, I'd say, when it comes to maybe how you're feeling, how your audience is feeling, maybe just metrics in general, data around that, and saying, okay, maybe people are feeling the same way that I am. So there can be red flags, but I feel like, again, there's no right time to do it. It could be when you start seeing that. It could be a year after that when you start seeing it. Whenever it feels like it's the best time for you taking that approach.
So you say warning signs. What are those?
Yeah, so, you know, are your views declining? Are you getting less engagements? Are you noticing yourself feeling burnt out? Are you truly are you coming across bored in your content? Do you feel like the people that were there and engaged before are no longer? Do you feel like for example, I can use as an example for me, because I had a tech channel. I wouldn't say I've touched it very long, but tech has gotten boring in a lot of ways too. And people have, I think in general, as a whole with cell phones, have gotten bored with that as a topic, recognizing the world of where it's at. Maybe this isn't so much a focus anymore. Maybe it's something different. So being aware of cultural or world, situations and where we're at right now, those can be kind of the red flags or warning signs. Okay, maybe it's time to think things through differently.
Yeah. I think as a creator, just in general, it's important to have some just self check-ins. I think it can be really easy to just like rubber hits the road and you just go, and it's just go mode, and you don't really check in with yourself too. So I think a lot of times with pivots, having that self check-in and maybe having the self-awareness to realize like, I'm super burnt out. Or maybe if we bring it back to like Tim and like vidIQ, it's like, I have an opportunity to reach with this vision and kind of this creed that I feel strongly about. I have an opportunity to reach a much broader audience if I do this. And so you can kind of like, from having those check-ins, decide, is this the right time to do this or not? Or is the pivot the right solution to kind of my circumstances right now or not?
Yeah, I feel like we've talked a lot about the practicality of it. And we've even kind of talked about, preparing for it. We've talked about, kind of like, what's that new value and how do you actually get your audience initially to engage even? I would love for us to really kind of spell out what the transition looks like for somebody who is a little apprehensive about making this kind of a move.
Yeah,
what do you think?
First and foremost, I think we touched on this a little bit already too, but not doing a hard 180, but a gradual kind of seed of the new direction you're going. Just for many reasons, it's jarring for your audience, jarring for YouTube, can be jarring for yourself too. You're throwing yourself off, but slowly implementing these new, like I think of any brand, even for us transitioning to vidIQ, it wasn't like a one-off, like we're all of a sudden vidIQ. It's been a slow, like, hey, we're slowly implementing new things, working on things in the background to make things fit in place that they need to go into before we kind of jump on this boat and say, okay, we're full steams ahead now. So for you, trying a new title and thumbnail or a new video structure or a new topic while you're also delivering on the same value you previously were, slowly, so people get used to the idea of where we're going.
Yeah, that's actually a very solid point there. When it comes to rebranding, like when's the time to pull that trigger?
It's a good question, actually.
That is a good question. I would imagine like on the earlier side, I don't really feel like there is like a wrong time to do it. I think it would be too early if you hadn't really maybe seeded a couple of things, even if there's like a community video or a community post that's kind of engaging with your audience. Like, hey, this is what I'm thinking. What do you guys think? And that sort of thing. I would imagine pretty quickly after that, you're good to go ahead and update some of that.
Yeah. And for me, when I've worked with clients on this, honestly, first off, your existing audience is never going to see your trailer because they're already subscribed.
Yeah, that's also true. Yeah, very true.
So that's a pretty safe mood. And creating a new banner is just going to give you clarity. And I don't think that there's a wrong time to be clear, really, in that. And chances are, if they're in your existing audience, they're clicking in from the homepage anyway. They're not going, to your channel page, usually. So I feel like a lot of creators worry about stuff like that when they don't really need to, because they're not thinking through how the viewer is actually engaging with their content. What are some of the things that you would want to test, though?
I would, I kind of mentioned this earlier, but I think if there's anything that would probably make the most impact, it probably would be speaking to some of the new value proposition, if there is like slightly different new primal branding around it. But if you're able to just like organically weave that just into your videos moving forward and kind of lean into that a little bit more, again, I don't think it has to be this long-winded scripted explanation or something like that. But, if you have a finance channel and you just recently pivoted it and now it's all about like financial freedom is kind of the language you're leaning into, like really use that language in every video and like try to find places to weave that in. I think that can make the most impact because even with like the trailer and the channel branding and stuff, like your audience doesn't often go to your channel page. Like usually they're going to consume your content and engage with you on like a video by video basis. So
I find that there's a lot of things that we as creators get hung up on and we create roadblocks that don't really exist a lot. So how do you know if it's working?
I would actually look in the comments. I don't think that's the only way to measure if it's working or not, but I would be looking in the comments and seeing. I think a really good sign that you are resonating with your audience is when they kind of use your language back to you. So if it is your value proposition, maybe running with the same example and somebody is sharing their experience with financial freedom, or I'm so glad I found this channel because like that freedom is exactly what I'm going after. When you start to see the comments like that, to me, that's a pretty good sign that we are reaching the right people.
Yeah, I feel like analytics can also be used a little bit here. So I'm curious what you guys think would be something to kind of monitor. Probably maybe the new content?
Yeah, I was thinking like looking at your click-through rate. I think we're testing out if it's a new topic, are people actually clicking into it? Are they not? Again, you won't know that till a few, iterations of experimentation there, but keeping an eye on that. And the impressions too.
Definitely.
There might be value in creating a benchmark for yourself going forward. And that's going to take a little time, right? So that might be, the next 10, 12 videos and really kind of seeing, how is it performing? And then using that as a roadmap going forward and adjusting, right?
Yeah. I think too, just kind of keeping tabs on like for your views, looking at non-subscribe versus subscribe. And then maybe also like new versus returning viewers, because maybe you make the pivot and like the views stay about the same and you're like, oh, this is pretty good. This worked. But it's like 99% of your views are like from your community.
Yeah.
Maybe you're not really reaching the new people that you're trying to reach. So keeping an eye on that too can kind of see, are we reaching the new people that we're going after?
I would probably lean into some, because I know that usually during pivots, we're leaning heavy into the community strategies, but at the same, because that's where we're trying to pivot the existing audience. I think it's really important to work in some discoverable strategies because you're trying to work in that new audience, right? And so that's something to just really be mindful of. Where do you think sales strategy fits in a pivot?
It's a good question.
It is, isn't it?
Like, and it depends on the person. It's like how I would say if you are able to, it might be a good idea to just kind of shelf some of your sales videos for just a little bit, because especially if you have a new audience coming in, like you want to build the know, like, and trust factor with them before it's like, all right, we pivoted. Here's the new channel. Now go buy my course or whatever. But it's also a very real reality that you're maybe a business owner and you have to rely on sales and you have to have that sales bucket as a part of your regular content strategy. Then
would it also be the drastic, like, I mean, if if we're thinking of a pivot as a course correction, if it's under the same dive as a business owner, can't imagine the pivot would be that extreme where the sales content wouldn't work. And also too, like if it's merchandise wise, like if it's a creator, like I don't see why you couldn't push that in the video and it still makes sense in some ways too.
That's true. Merch actually could work really well here, actually, because it's really getting everybody on board, kind of like being part of the new ecosystem, right? Do we share that same creed? Do we share that same, passion? That could definitely be part of it. But I do feel like there is something really valuable in what Sam is saying, though, in, maybe just be flexible during this time and recognize that it isn't all about you. And nobody really likes change. I don't know anybody who really likes change other than Tim.
I was going to say Tim does.
Tim has gotten us all inoculated here around change. But, I feel like do what's best for your audience. And if that means for a while, shelve a little bit of the sales content so that you can continue to grow the know, like, and trust factor, especially if you're bringing in a new audience. They don't know you, from your backlog. They need to get to know you a little bit.
Yeah. I think the content frequency comes into play too. Because if you're posting like one video a month, then you may want to maybe we shelf the sales video because it's going to be a slow pivot if we're not uploading very much. Maybe if you were to implement like a discoverable video or a community video instead of that, then we'll just speed things up a little bit faster too.
Yeah, totally agree. What would be some other strategies that you would recommend for somebody transitioning through a pivot?
I think one idea is keeping in mind your new audience is coming in. So while you're focusing on your new audience, don't neglect your old one at the same time. Make them feel still included, because it feels horrible to just be dropped after you're not, not viewed, I guess, useful anymore. That's a weird way of saying it. That's where my mind went, though. Not the greatest language. Avoid that.
I felt that.
Yeah, but that's kind of like the way.
Blake is ditching us, Sam.
No, but definitely take the time to cultivate that new community, because you're going to have to, and get them to come back and watch more. But recognize people who are there for the time being, who are part of your old community, and some of them may not be overly happy with the pivot, but we want to make sure we can ease that as much as possible, just to kind of keep things stable on your channel. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like collaborations can really come into play here too, because you're going to be excited. So what other exciting things can you bring in for your audience? It might be a time to experiment a little bit, right?
It could be kind of a nice injection of shared audience too. It could inject some life.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
Because if this person you're collaborating with has the same audience, and it's like the same audience post pivot, that could also kind of speed things up too, I think.
Yeah. I feel like one of the key points, though, is to be patient. Successfully pivoting your YouTube channel, it really almost requires a little bit of strategic planning. This is not just a random idea that you're just going to throw up and create. You've got to be clear in your communication with your audience and just recognize that it's going to be a gradual transition. The key is to really be patient through it. If you lose your focus, you could run the risk of not just alienating your existing audience, but also not reaching the wider, more engaged audience. We know you have this.
Every week we love to leave you with a power tip, something that YouTube is doing, or some ways to think about YouTube in a new way. And this week actually came from a discussion we had earlier, some strategists talking about shorts and how to kind of approach them. One thing that kind of came up was, sometimes people approach shorts almost as a different form or different type of content, completely regular from their long form content on their channel. And the struggle can be sometimes, although we're pursuing shorts, people find that they're becoming a shorts channel rather than getting people to come to the long form content and finding that blend between the two mediums. So I guess the question or the encouragement I have for a lot of you thinking about shorts and how to kind of approach them is, how can you make shorts an extension of what you're currently doing, using the same format, using the same kind of structure, but in a smaller way, smaller medium, so that the blend is consistent, and that if people find your shorts on the short shelf, it makes sense and ties seamlessly into your long form content as well. What are your guys' thoughts?
It's a great tip. I feel like one of the struggles with shorts are actually that people really experiment a little too far, right? To the point where they're actually tapping into the wrong audience.
Yeah.
So I think that that's a great tip, Blake.
Well, it's just funny that we're talking about this because I did a consultation yesterday with a coffee channel. So they sell coffee equipment, and
Your dream consultation.
match made in heaven. I was on top of the world. It was the best. And so they were looking at a competitor, their channel. And so we kind of looked at it together. And they're like, it's weird because they got so many subscribers because they had a few shorts that went really, really, really far, but they have no traction on their regular form content. Like, should we be doing shorts or not? And so we dove into that channel's shorts, and there were like 6 shorts that got like over 10 million views, like just massive views. And all 6 of them were like specifically around Turkish coffee. But it wasn't even about making Turkish coffee. It was just like these weird experiments with Turkish coffee. But the channel was like a coffee equipment, how to brew coffee. Like it was different. And it was such a clear, exactly what we're talking about. It was such a clear example of, you got a ton of subscribers, but like it wasn't the right audience and they're not watching your regular form videos. So super interesting. Yeah.
Thanks for listening to another Video Creators podcast. We'll see you next week.